Today I'm going to finish this lecture, which is about an introduction to Cheklin's SSM, and then I shall start right away with the detailed explanation of this in lecture 10. Now, all the material I covered today and tomorrow are included in your examination. So please pay attention, okay? We have an exam tomorrow, right? In the introduction, we have made several comments about how the soft system methodology originated and how it developed. And I told you, if you remember, that it has passed through several versions. I mean, the first version, which was explained in Cheklin's book in 1981, was called the seven steps of SSM. And then through time, when it was used in different problem situations, modifications were made. As you might expect, such modifications will always be made because SSM is a methodology rather than a method, and it has to adapt to the conditions of problem situations itself. So the latest version of SSM, actually, the core, the central body of SSM is now known as the four-step SSM, this one. So as you can see, this is a reduced representation of the original seven-step procedure. I would like you to remember this one when SSM is mentioned. As you can see, there are four steps. It's a very simple process, actually. The difficulty is perhaps in the implementation rather than the concept. The concept is fairly straightforward. As you can see in the first step, there's a real-world problematical situation, but actually it's not the real-world problematical situation. It's the perception of the real-world problematical situation. So an observer perceives a problematic situation in the real world in step number one. Then, based on his perceptions, he constructs purposeful activity models at step two, as you can see. An arrow is leading from 1 to 2. And there are 3 sheets of paper, as you can see, on step number 2. In step number 2, these sheets of paper are representations of codifications. You codify something, you put it on paper, what you have in mind. What you have in mind now is passed on to paper so that it can be observed by other people. So an activity model, therefore, a purposeful activity model, is the explicit representation of our mind pictures of what is happening in the real world. And then there's a comparison step, number 3. The models are used to make comparisons between what the model is telling us and what is taking place in the real world. And this comparison actually takes the form of a discussion, a structured discussion. As we compare our models with the real world, but of course, as you can see, there are 3 pieces of paper in number 2, not just one single piece of paper, but 3, indicating that there are more than one purposeful activity models. In this representation, there are 3 models. Why do we have 3 models? Well, because there are 3 different people who are observing the real world, and they have all 3 different perceptions, perhaps. Let's say not 3 different people, but 3 groups of people sharing the same perception. So there are 3 different perceptions, depending on maybe 3 different Weltanschauungen, the worldviews of reality. So the discussion takes place among the authors of these 3 models. And this discussion is about change. Everybody is concerned about the problematical situation, which calls for some sort of change. so that improvement will occur at the end. So this discussion is about change, and in step number 4, an action is taken to improve the problematical situation. But we do not stop at number 4. The diagram tells us that we should go back to number 1, step number 1, indicating that this SSM is not a sequential or linear process which has a beginning and an end. It's a circular, cyclical process which does not have an end. The reason why it is like this, because it's a learning process. It's not a problem solution process. It's not a problem solving process. It's a problem resolving process, problematical situation resolution process, which is implemented by facilitating learning about the problem situation. So it's a cyclic process like that. The linear structure, you can say, for example, that we start with number 1, so there is some linearity or sequence. This sequence is something like this. As you can see, the step, finding out step starts first. That long rectangle at the top is step number 1, which starts earliest but does not end. It goes on indefinitely. Model building comes after that. As you can see, there are 3 different models. Discussion and debating takes place using all these models, and also observations from the real world. And action takes place at the end over there, as you can see. So the sequential, this is like a very primitive Gantt chart. It shows how the steps precede one another, these 4 steps. I never executed in sequence. There are goings and coming backs. Although SSM often starts with step 1 activity, will then continue simultaneously in more than one step, as shown in this diagram. So that's a short introduction to SSM. We can now go right over to the detailed account of SSM, which is a rather long lecture. We have 52 slides. Tomorrow we shall go on with this. Please pay attention, right? Because, I mean, students often ask me in the examination which chapters are included or which lectures are included. These questions are not very meaningful in this sort of class. I mean, everything is connected to everything else. The concepts are interwoven, and you will benefit from paying attention, even though I cannot tell you that this is included or not included in the exam. So this is SSM in detail. It was, as I said, developed over several years experientially, I mean, through experience. It was developed by doing. It's action research. Action research is research which takes place during the action itself, rather than it's online action, it's online research, not offline. So it went through a number of versions, different versions. The present version is called the 4 activities or 4 steps SSM. The 4 activities make up the SSM learning cycle, as we have been stressing, that often progresses simultaneously in all activities after starting with the first one. So it's a learning cycle. This is a repetition of what we have just discussed. The 4 activities are these: finding out about a problem situation, including the social and the political aspects. The important modifications or qualifications are underlined. As you can see, we find out about the problematical situation in the first step, in the first action of SSM, but this should include both social and political aspects. The second one is the building of purposeful activity models. This is model construction. But you know that these models are of a special type of model, not mathematical models. Then in the third step, we use the models to structure discussion. The models are necessary, because the discussion that has to take place between the different observers or stakeholders should not be an arbitrary type of discussion. It shouldn't be unstructured, because unstructured and ad hoc discussions that we often partake in our everyday life they do not lead to concrete results. What's the result that we are talking about here? What sort of result are we seeking from this discussion? What's the name of the result that we are searching for? Yes, it's an accommodation to take common action, a common decision to take action. Organizations of all sorts can only survive if they are able to take decision to act. If an organization cannot decide to act, then probably it will lose its distinguishability. It will melt into its surroundings. It will be taken over by entropy. It will disappear. For an organization to keep going, it has to be different from its surroundings. It has to fight against entropy. This is the main idea of all organizations. So in order to do that, the end result of step number 3 is to reach an accommodation so that I think the Turkish word, the best Turkish equivalent for accommodation is uzlaşma, I think. Uzlaşma does not actually mean fikir birliği. Uzlaşma is something that you give something and the other party gives something and you decide to act together, even though you have your own ideas still intact. And step number 4 is defining and taking action in the situation to bring about some improvement. So these are the 4 steps. Now we're going to discuss each step in detail. And in discussing these steps, we are going to introduce some ways of implementing each of these steps. For example, in finding out, how can we find out about the problematical situation? You will see that several of the instruments we have already talked about can be used here in each step. For example, in the first step, clearly, you can imagine that a good instrument would be a rich picture. You can start with a rich picture, for example. So the detailed discussion of these descriptions of these steps will include, will mention the several instruments that you can make use of. These instruments have been developed and designed during the hundreds of applications of SSM in time. And we mentioned those instruments which have proven most useful and which have survived. You can also devise your own instruments, for example, in implementing these 4 steps, depending on the situation. The ones that we are going to look at are the ones which have been most useful in many, many applications, and they have survived through time. So the step number 1 is the finding out step. The tools and techniques useful in this step are making rich pictures, as we have already said. We're not going to spend any time on rich pictures. This is something we are all familiar with by now. And then there are 3 types of analysis, called analysis 1, analysis 2, analysis 3. It's useful to remember these analyses. Analysis 1 is about the intervention itself. Analysis 2 is the analysis of social issues, and 3, that of political issues. Now we're going to make some comments on each of these. But a better way of learning about this is, of course, by doing it. Unfortunately, we cannot have all our students do a term project on SSM because of practical difficulties I explained to you before. It's impossible in a university situation. I mean, if we had only 3 or 4 groups of students, it would have been possible, but with 20 or 30 groups, it's not possible. So what I'm trying to do, instead of having you learn through experience, the best we can do is have you look at a good case study and detailed case study of SSM. There are many, many case studies of SSM. Some of them are very interesting and complicated. We used in the past case studies from the Shell company, the oil company, Shell. We use case studies from the National Health Service, etc., which were really complicated. This year I have uploaded a case study again from the National Health Service, but it's simplified. What I'm trying to say is that this year we decided to give you one midterm examination. And the disadvantage of this is that I cannot ask you to construct such models and do an exercise on SSM in another examination. So that, I mean, the examination, the midterms are useful because you get back your papers, you learn from your mistakes, etc. This year we don't have that opportunity, so I ask our assistants to conduct some problem sessions and also use some of the remaining lectures in class to do some practical work and also rely on the case study. The case study is important, of course, obviously for the final exam also. But please just be patient. Try to understand what we are explaining here. But all the clarifications will be possible only by studying the case study and the other exercises we are going to do in the remaining lectures. So making rich pictures, the complexity of human situations is always one of multiple interacting relationships. A picture is a good way to show these relationships. The aim is to capture informally the main entities. The main entities are the people, the machinery, the issues, the relationships, the inventory stocks, everything. All the entities should be represented on the picture. Structures, processes, structures, viewpoints, different Weltanschauungen, etc. should all be the conflicts that are clearly there, etc. The process is going on, the current recognized issues and any potential ones. Recognized issues are points of contention. Contention means disagreement, points of disagreement, but also potential points of contention as well. These all should be indicated on the rich picture. That's all we are going to say about rich pictures. Analysis 1, in every case of SSM, 3 elements are involved. The methodology, the use of the methodology by a practitioner, and the situation. There are these 3 aspects or components of every problem situation. There is a methodology, which is indicated by the sheet at the bottom there. And there's a practitioner and a situation. Intervening in the problematical situation via means using this methodology that addresses the perceived content of the situation, these 3 elements. At the right-hand side, at the top, we have the problem situation. At the bottom, we have the methodology. On the left-hand side, at the top, is the person who intervenes, the practitioner. So analysis 1 is about understanding who is who here, okay? The 3 key roles are always present. There is some person. Now, this is very similar to the problem elements in hardware. You remember hardware in elements when we ask you, for example, to recognize the elements of a hardware problem situation. You identify the problem owner, the problem users, the practitioner or the analyst, the affected, etc. So this is similar. Unfortunately, not the same terms are used. The terms change a little bit, but you will be able to recognize whether these correspond exactly to the elements, problem elements in a hardware situation. So there is some person or a group of persons who has caused the intervention. Some intervention is taking place. An intervention is a change. A change takes place as a result of the decision we take after we reach an accommodation. Okay? A change takes place. Now, there must be some person who causes this intervention to happen, someone without whom there would not be an investigation at all. This person or this group of people are called the client. This corresponds roughly to the problem owner in hardware, as you know. If there is no problem owner, there will not be any change. There won't be a hardware project. It is similar here. If there is no client, there's no project taking place. So there's a first group of people or person called the client. There's some person or group of persons who are conducting the investigation. This is the role of the practitioner. This is another term. Instead of analyst or the industrial engineer or the operational researcher, etc., we call this person now the practitioner. The reason we call him the practitioner, he doesn't analyze only, he practices. He's part of the action research. So he's taking place in online research, not offline research. So that's why it's better to call him a practitioner. Most importantly, whoever is in the practitioner role could choose and list a number of people. Now, if you are the practitioner, you could make a list of people, a number of people who can be regarded as being concerned about or affected by the situation and the outcome of the effort to improve it. All right? This is the role, owner of the issues addressed. Now, as a result of the intervention, the lives, the practices, the processes of some people will have changed. They will be affected by this intervention. These people, we not identify them from the beginning. These people are going to be identified by the practitioner. They are called the owner or the owners of the issues addressed. All right? So there's a slight differentiation of the roles of different people played in an SSM compared to different people involved in a hardware project. Now, analysis 1 is indicated by this diagram of Checkland. Let's look at the diagram. At the top there, you have the three-component situation where there is a practitioner, there's a methodology, and there's a real-world situation. Now, and we have identified three groups of people, or three roles. These are not really different groups of people necessarily, but these roles. What's the difference between a person and a role? The person Ahmed, for example, can play the role of the practitioner, but he may also be included, he could also be the client role. So roles are important here, not specific persons. So there are three roles, as you can see: the client, the practitioner, and the issue owners, as you can see. The role of the client is that she causes the intervention to happen. She initiates, or he initiates the intervention to happen. The practitioner carries out the intervention using SSM. And this practitioner can choose and name. It's up to the practitioner to identify and name the issue owners. The issue owners are possible persons or groups taken to own the issues addressed. Yani sorumlu üstlenen, meseleleri sahiplenen ve onların sonuçlarıyla yaşamak zorunda olan değişimin sonuçlarıyla. List of issue owners. This leads to ideas about relevant worldviews, leading to ideas for relevant models. Okay, so in analysis 1, therefore, we are able to identify different issue owners. You see, the role of the client is not too important here. Probably the client himself is one of these people. Okay? The importance here is placed totally on problem issue owners of the issues. This leads to ideas about relevant worldviews, leading to ideas for relevant models. So the clue here at the end, in that expression, is that there will be different issue owners who will have different Weltanschauungen, different worldviews, and therefore, when we come to the construction of purposeful activity models, there will be more than one model constructed. Okay? So it's as if each purposeful activity model will be a representation of one of these issue owners about how she perceives the problematical real world situation. So that's I mean, presumably you are the practitioner, since you are educating as IEs. There are several graduates of our department who are doing this sort of work, although maybe not exactly doing SSM, but very similar work like this, practitioners. And it's up to you. It's your responsibility to decide who these people are. Huh? This is your central role here. Analysis 2, so that's analysis 1. In analysis 1, we identify the issue owners through the process we have explained. In analysis 2, analyzing the situation as a social system, building on knowledge of the significant roles that people occupy to investigate the norms and values that are expressed. So there are 3 entities in analysis 2, written in red, underlined in red. Roles, norms, and values. These are what we identify in analysis 2. Roles are taken to be the social positions people occupy, which might be institutional or behavioral. I mean, if it's an institutional role, maybe it's the role of a manager, perhaps, or the role of an engineer. That's an institutional role. It could also be behavioral. For example, the role of a troublemaker. Troublemakers are important in organizations. If you don't have troublemakers, probably your organization will fail in the end. So the role you play may depend on the behavior you exhibit, you conduct. So it could be institutional or behavioral. Norms are the expected or normal behavior in this context. So norms are expected or normal behavior. It comes from the same root, norm, normal. Huh? Values are the local standards used to judge people's norms. So please learn these concepts. Huh? Values are the local standards. So it means that these standards will change from location to location. The totality of values and norms is also known as what? What's the word we use to indicate values and norms in an organization? Yes, the culture, the culture of the organization. The idea of this analysis is that the analysts try to understand how people play out their roles. So this is what we do. As you can see, there's a simple diagram at the bottom which says each arrow means, in quotation, creates and recreates. The arrows mean create and recreate. As you can see, the roles that we play create the norms, and the norms create the values, and the values create the roles, and vice versa. So there is a very intimate interaction between roles, norms, and values. Okay? And roles can be formal or informal, meaning formal roles are institutional roles, informal roles are, yes, behavioral roles, okay? Now, how do we carry out this analysis? Do we have some instruments that might prove useful? Well, not exactly instruments perhaps, but we can define a procedure of implementing analysis 2. At the start of an intervention, open a file. Open a file. This file could be a pencil and paper file, it could be a computer file, it could be a file in your I don't know, laptop, telephone, or whatever, and the title of this file is going to be analysis 2. Now, every time you interact with this situation, now you are the practitioner, right? You are interacting with this situation. You're talking to somebody, you're making an observation, something, like talking to people informally, reading a document, sitting in a meeting, etc. Ask yourself afterwards whether that taught you anything about the roles, norms, and values which are taken seriously here and characterize this particular group. So this is what you do. When you speak to somebody, when you don't speak to somebody but listen to a meeting among different people in the organization, or when you study the documents of the organization, when you finish, ask yourself if you have learned anything about the roles, the norms, and the values of the organization. If you have learned anything like that, then record the finding in the analysis 2 file. Write it down in the analysis 2 file. Carry on doing this throughout the engagement. This is a very simple procedure. So you open a file, and in each type of interaction you may have participated in, afterwards ask yourself whether you have learned anything and then record it in this file. This is how you do it. You are there standing at the center, and you are observing, as you can see, the real-world problematical situation. This observation is, for example, by taking part in a committee, in a discussion, in some other meeting, looking at statistical records that have collected, etc. And you ask yourself after this interaction, what interacting roles, norms, values characterize this situation? And you think in terms of those norms, values, that interaction between these three, and that yields for reflection in your analysis 2 file. Analysis 3 is about politics. Politics is a part of culture not addressed directly in the examination of roles, norms, and values of analysis 2. So analysis 2 is not about the entire culture of the organization. There is something missing usually. That's called politics. Now this is extremely important, the politics of a problem situation. Of course, by politics, don't understand national politics. This is politics of each organization. Politics is about power. When we say politics, the immediate concept you should remember is power, iktidar, power, kudret. How power is, where power lies, how is it exercised? This is what we mean by politics. Now, the function of analysis 3 is it determines what is culturally feasible. Remember that intervention has to satisfy 2 conditions if it's going to be able to be some improvement in the problem situation. After accommodation, we take action. That action, if it is successful in producing an improvement, it has to satisfy 2 conditions. The first one is systemically desirable. The action must be systemically desirable. And secondly, it should be culturally feasible. So the cultural feasibility is investigated in analysis 3. Accommodating different interests is the concern of politics. Pursuit of interests take place in a power-based structure. So each organization has a power-based structure. Analysis 3 in SSM asks, how is power expressed in this situation? The role of power in organizations was first understood to be the fundamental relationship in each organization, in social organizations, by Karl Marx in the 19th century. Marx has used this point of view, the power point of view, in understanding human organizations or human phenomena. So it is very, very important, as you know, from also your everyday life. We know this. Now, how do we do that? Again, you can take up a file called analysis 3. You have, therefore, 3 files. This is 1, 2, 3 files. And again, by observing the real world, now you answer these questions. What are the commodities of power here? So we have a concept, a new concept called commodity, power commodity, commodity of power. Are they obtained? How are they obtained? What used, defended, passed on, relinquished? You understand this? How is this commodity obtained? How is it used? We're going to see what we mean by commodity in a moment. How is it defended? Sometimes what takes place within the intention of roles, values, norms, etc., is that people appear to be defending their positions, positions of power. Sometimes they do not defend it by pass it on. What's the concept of passing your power on to someone else? What's the word we use there? Delegation. Delegation. You delegate your authority to somebody else. Delegation or devolvement. Devolvement. Anyway, relinquished. Relinquish is you give up your power. You give it up. All these are recorded. Now, the questions. That question can be faced through the metaphor of a commodity. It's a metaphor, obviously. It's not a real commodity. A metaphor, commodity which embodies power, which takes different forms. For example, what are the commodities of power? The first and most obvious one is hierarchical power. This is the power accorded to a person by the organization chart of an organization. In the organization chart, for example, at the top, we have top management of the organization, if it's a commercial organization, or if it's a political organization. At the top, we have the Politburo or whatever, the Merkez Yönetim Kurulu, or the Parti Meclisi, etc. That's hierarchical power. There are managers, etc., who have authority and responsibilities. So that's personal charisma, for example, is another commodity of power. This is very important in all organizations, especially in small ones. Personal charisma. Committee membership. For example, if you're a member of a committee, even though you don't have hierarchical power other than being a member of a committee, you might be very, very powerful because you have the right to speak in that committee and influence the decisions taken in that committee. Access to information. This is another commodity. This is maybe informal, access to information. An example could be the secretary to the chief executive officer, the CEO of a company. The secretary who answers the telephone and arranges the appointments, etc., normally has no hierarchical power. But she could be very, very powerful because she has access to information. She knows what the CEO is going to do tomorrow, etc., etc., this sort of thing. Intellectual authority. This commodity is important in universities. Intellectual authority. So open a file and record in it with a date any learning gained about power and the processes through which it is exercised. So analysis 3 is about power. Then once you, of course, keep these files, you don't put them on a shelf. You have to read these files every day and reflect upon it. Reflection. Reflection is like concentrated thinking, right? Or critical thinking. Reflection. Reflect upon it over the whole course of an investigation. So that completes the first of the 4 steps. Step number 2 is model building. Now, this will take a while. We shall, I'm going to use some examples we have introduced before, the Bakuyi-Ceyhan case to explain these. To build models, we first need a statement describing the activity system to be modeled. Now, in step number 2, we are going to build purposeful activity models. So there must be an activity that is going to be modeled. What is this activity? How do we identify the activity? So we need a definition, first of all. We need a statement describing the activity system to be modeled. This definition is called a root definition. Such descriptions are known in SSM as root definitions. We shall abbreviate with RD. A very simple example. The example is simple of a root definition because the problem situation is simple. This is about painting the fence of your garden. We have seen a purposeful activity model for this system. A root definition could be a system to paint the garden fence. You could use this as a root. It is not a very good root definition. It's too simple, probably, because it doesn't describe the action in all its detail. A more useful root definition for this case could be as follows. A householder, a household is a family, householder is the owner of the house. A householder owned and staffed system to paint the garden fence by hand painting in keeping with the overall decoration scheme of the property in order to enhance the appearance of the property. This is, again, another root definition, which is much more useful because it gives a much fuller description of the activity system, including the purpose, the way that action is going to be implemented, etc., etc. So root definitions are statements like this.